but 10, 12 minutes isn't even going to be in the ballpark. Sorry.
I would like to think that if they're having a testimony tonight, that those will be taken into consideration as well.
Thank you. Mr. Rossbach.
Just for the record, if I had my way, I'd also ban cell phones and DVDs and eating in the car.
And so I've seen you talk on your cell phone in your car, but that's okay.
Yes, well, it's legal, but I wouldn't do it if it was illegal. So the point is that you're making up people's. You're talking like you know what people would do, and that somehow your position is better than others, and that's not true. And also, the Chamber was extremely active when we first went into our sign ordinance process 2 years ago. And matter of fact, are a big part of why the process took so long, because they made us stop and think. And so you're also inaccurate on that statement.
Ms. Juniman.
My question isn't for him, so if we want to continue with this person and then come back to me, it's fine, because it's more of a council staff question.
Okay, that's very good. Then we'll defer to your question till later. Mr. Jelly?
And once again, I'm not running for re-election, and when they come up and stand in front of you, and they actually have their little endorsement parties, remember this conversation, all right?
The one where he badmouthed you and I didn't.
But I'm not going to be there, so it isn't going to matter.
Okay, council. Let's see, a couple of quick questions that I have for you. I understand your position then to be that you're looking to have the changeover time to be less than what's being proposed for on-premise signs currently in the ordinance, correct?
Mayor, correct. I would actually prefer both of them, on-site and off-site, to be closer to the 10 to 12 second area.
Okay. Do you see a benefit to having the identical, I mean, from a business perspective of having the same consistent changeover time no matter if it's on-premise or off-premise, or does it not really matter from a business perspective?
Mayor, I don't know if it matters too much. Again, with the MnDOT study, it would indicate that there might be a slight difference in time based on if people driving by are going 55 miles an hour or over, or 40 miles an hour or under.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Mr. Nephew?
Yeah, thanks, Jed. Here's another, sorry to put you on the spot with hypotheticals here, but it's really valuable to get, from your experience in dealing with the communities, businesses that have to deal with this kind of issue. One of the questions that sort of came up in the last meeting when we were talking about this sort of as a sort of philosophy of how we should be approaching this. I mean, obviously, we're trying to grant permission to a new type of thing in the city, but we are concerned about the potential public safety impacts. There certainly has been, in the various studies that have been given to us, there has been public impact cited for billboards and the like, but there's also an important function to signs. And I think that there's a big upside to this technology, and so I want to find ways to allow us to begin easing into it. So having said that, it seems to me that as a regulatory body, we can begin with something that is more permissive, say 6 or 8 seconds for everything in the city. But it seems like no one's actually done the studies so far on exactly what we're talking about with the on-site signage and streets that have a lot of traffic controls and intersections and changing traffic patterns in a way that you don't see on freeways. So would it be better for the business community's planning purposes if we started more permissive and then perhaps in the future had to crack down by telling people, sorry, all your schedules of your investment in this are now wrong because it turns out that for safety reasons we really have to make it a minute instead of 12 seconds? Or is it better for us to begin by being a little bit, dipping the toe in the water more slowly, start at the minute or 5 minutes even, and work our way down as we find that it's not having a negative impact on traffic in those areas, that it's not mushrooming out of control with the unpredictable effects when multiple businesses are along the same stretch of the road independently making their decisions about when and how to transition to this kind of technology.
Sure. Mayor, Councilmember Nephew, it's an excellent question, and I would have to say, based on my conversations with some of our members, they would prefer probably to have it start off at that 6 to 8 second interval. I think they'd have a fear that they probably wouldn't be able to get the advertisers to come that they would want at first.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Ms. Juniman?
Well, as long as we're on this topic, which wasn't what my original question was, but I'll have to disagree with Mr. Nephew on the human race. You don't normally start something like that low and say, oh, well, you know what, that's not working for us, so we're going to have to make it bigger and make you unhappy now. You start where you want to be, and then if it really isn't working, you discuss, and they tell you that it's not working because blah, blah, and blah. And I don't want to look like I'm anti-business, because I'm not, but that's just a little philosophical thing that we need to hang on to here. It's like, oh, well, to please you, we'll start at 6 to 8, and then if we don't like it, yeah, okay. And they're all going to go, fine, once they're here. Then you'll have the argument that your advertisers are going to pull out. So that is not, in my opinion, is not something we can debate based on what he's saying is potential advertisers might or might not do. We have to decide what we want, for what reason, and then they can counter it, but I don't believe we should start somewhere and say, okay, well, it's not working for us now, so guess what? Now it's 3 minutes. I mean, I just don't think that's the way that kind of stuff works out. Just an opinion.
Yeah, in my experience, I can't think of any example, at least in my mind right at this point, where a governmental regulation started out at being
Where they want
more restrictive, and then that the regulating body decided that it was okay to perhaps be less restrictive. I guess maybe I could think of maybe a couple now that I'm thinking of that, but generally speaking, I think it becomes more restrictive, if it starts out more restrictive, that it doesn't change to become less restrictive. But I think a governing body, certainly if they start out at a lesser restriction based upon health and safety reasons or whatever, then they have a justification to say, well, we need to have the changeover time, in this instance, being a little bit greater. And so that, I guess, the point that I'm hearing from Mr. Nephew, if I'm accurate, is that if you start out with a little bit more flexibility at a lower changeover, then if you find out you've got your health and safety issues, then you can then put your finger to those and say, for those reasons, we really do need to make it more restrictive based on health and safety. Because it sounds to me like we really don't have the studies to justify having a different changeover rate. And that is, I think, one of my concerns, is that without having a particular quantifiable, objective study that specifically says what we are trying to say in our ordinance, to back up what we're trying to say in our ordinance, I think that it could be subject to challenge. So that's, I guess, my comment looking at both of those. Mr. Nephew.
I think perhaps my question, which I wasn't really taking one side or the other in posing the question, maybe was being misunderstood. To me, it does make sense to start with something that is more restrictive and to loosen it up over time. And I can think of lots of cases where that has happened, particularly in the areas of technology and government regulations, whether you're talking about the telecommunications industry or internet domains, which originally had to be through a particular registrar, and then that got opened up, and various things like that. And I think that this is something that especially makes sense when we're dealing with newer technologies, and we don't, as imaginative as human beings are, we haven't worked out all the permutations of what happens in the field. And the lack of scientific studies is a chicken or egg scenario. Mm-hmm. We could say, well, we don't have any scientific studies to say what the duration could be. Well, does that mean that we should say anything goes, and we'll see which corner, what the changeover times are in the corners with the most traffic fatalities? And that's how we'll figure out which, what the one that had the least deaths is the number we'll go with. I'm not sure that that's a really good approach, and I don't even know if it would have liability issues for operators whose signs could be implicated in that. But to my mind, I would like to figure out what a number is that is sufficiently low to make the finances work so that some people can start doing it, but not so low as to be a complete free-for-all, and not so low as to burn a lot of people who may go and make the investment and then find out that they based it on assumptions in what they expected in terms of revenue per hour for ad sales and stuff like that wound up getting by us or by another regulatory agency. I mean, who knows, the state government might decide to step in and pass some regulation that was more restrictive than what we had. So
Yeah, coming late, they're good at.
yeah, exactly. Something we've seen them do. So that's why I'm more inclined to err on the side of caution there. There is a certain, within the market forces, I think that there is a certain balance that is going to happen in that if the turnover time is such that it's harder to make the numbers work, then not as many businesses are going to jump on board right away. But that means that they're going to have a more valuable asset for that investment, being early adopters, as opposed to if everybody puts the signs up and is trying to sell the same ad space simultaneously, then you're going to have a glut of supply on the market as well. So I think there's probably some trade-off there in the dynamics of the market that we can work with as well. But also comprehensive sign plan. Again, it's custom made for some of the areas where I would expect this to be experimented with first.
And Mayor, if I can make one more comment.
Yeah, go ahead,
Councilmember
please.
Yeah.
Nephew, I completely understand what you're saying, although the signs are very expensive, so I can't imagine too many members of the community would be out purchasing signs right away.
Okay. Mr. Rossbach? Did
Just
you
a
have-
couple more points. There's been some excellent ones made, I think. One that I wanted to make, and you just hit it on the head, is that right now they're very expensive, but they won't be in the future. Just like all pieces of technology, they'll become commonplace, and then it will be much less expensive for people to put up this type of sign. Matter of fact, I would predict that this will be the type of signs that will be put up. Most all instances 15 years from now. Even on our traffic signs, we can have our traffic signs alter with the weather conditions and so on and so forth. And so I would think that they will become quite inexpensive. And so that, I think, is another factor in us trying to determine how long that display should be up there. And I would also be interested as we move forward to maybe get a little bit more information from the mall would be a good example. The people who are going to buy the time, nobody's going to complain about their image being up there for 5 minutes. It's just that the people who are putting up the signs and making the investment need to make a certain amount of money, and they can make more money the shorter that span is. And so it's not the advertisers that have a problem with the length of time, it's the person who's deciding that they want to make money by putting up a dynamic sign. And so more information brought forward to us in the future, real information showing how much they charge for each segment of advertising, and that we can see that, okay, you're making a whole bunch of money, and so, we're not all that concerned about that. Or, yep, we understand that unless you get this much money, you can't make it work. But that's information, but there's been no real information like that brought to us. And I would be surprised if anybody did, actually. So, those would be things that I think would be important.
Okay. Any other comments or public testimony you would like to share with us?
Not for me.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Are there other citizens here who wish to address this issue before us? Yes, welcome, and please state your name and address for the record.
Jeff Kerr, 3090 South Lawn Drive, General Manager of Myth. The reality is there aren't a lot of studies being done right now because these signs are so new. And what the studies that you do find obviously have to do more with the highway traffic and things like that. The FHTB is due out with a new study in the spring of next year, which will be more comprehensive and things like that. But to reiterate what the gentleman said prior, a lot of the studies that are being done by groups that are either for or against, and so you can go back and forth and find, any information you want to support your cause type thing. We don't have real information, and the reason we don't have real information is because these are new. And what we're doing tonight is speculating on something that we just don't have enough information on. But I will say that we as business people need those signs at a bigger, a smaller changeover rate to help us do what we do. For me specifically, with promoting shows, there's, as you know, we can do 20 shows in a month. And that's important to continue to advertise what's coming through our facility in order for us to stay in business, and that's important to us. And so I would just, again, reiterate that